Welcome boys and girls, Christine here with a discussion about the Dwarves in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. As far as races go in the game, the Dwarves are almost the perfect race that Creative Assembly has designed. Most of the issues they actually have come down to problems with the game itself rather than with them as a race. So for instance, one of the issues they have is they have a good amount of unit variety, but some of those units like Slayers are a lot of the times not worth it because of the auto-resolve, valuing armor as opposed to actual combat ability. And to be clear, a Slayer army might not be as great as a Dwarf Warrior army in certain situations, absolutely, but in terms of auto-resolve, these guys can defeat endgame armies, these guys can't defeat endgame armies. You might understand the problem with that, especially the shielded version. So you got shields, you got armor, you got melee stats. It all plays a role, like melee defense in particular seems to count quite a bit. Though, yeah, Slayers can be pretty damn good in their own right. Oh, they'll take more damage. There are certainly some issues, but those are more inherently game issues as opposed to dwarf issues. There are some dwarf issues, but let's consider what the dwarves do very, very well. First off, lots of units, lots of variety. You have flying units, you have artillery, you have infantry, you have range units. The principal dwarf playstyle is based on artillery units, flying units, and range units, gunpowder or crossbows. Melee is more in a support role with that. The one thing I would say doesn't really work out is Slayers, but consider these guys compared to other good races. You can think of Dark Elves, who do very well in many ways. Dark Elves, they have a strong early game situation, but then they drop off. Or Skaven. Like, there are some things that really work well with Skaven. Absolutely. And then there are some things that are just not worth it with Skaven. Dwarves are in a really good spot. And they would be in an even better spot, again, if the auto-resolve would work better. Heroes are widely available, not a problem. Their economy works, can generate a lot of money. Actually, quite a ridiculous amount of money. They have a dynamic campaign system for the Age of Reckoning. And they also have medium-term and long-term objectives that they're aiming for through the legendary grudge system. And then they have Worldwide Confederation, which can also bring a lot of variety in their campaigns. Now, what are the specific dwarf issues that one may encounter? Compared to some other races, these are going to seem minor, but it's one of the reasons I would like Creative Assembly to finish working on the dwarves. Because I do think Thrones of Decay did a lot, I think they should go further. So one of the big issues is actually Legendary Lord mechanics, or the lack thereof. You look at Ungrim, powerful Lord, really good in combat, good skill line at the moment, as opposed to what he had pre-Thrones of Decay. But he only gets like, oh, recruitment cost for Slayers, which, given the dwarf economy, doesn't matter, 10% speed for infantry. But then you have Belegar. Look at Belegar. Belegar is one of the worst legendary lords to actually play as a faction. Himself, he's extremely good. Like his skill line, his combat ability, the heroes he gets. Really, really good. But his campaign is just broken. It's broken from the following perspective. You start a campaign with plus 50% upkeep for units, and your goal is to take Caracade Peaks, when the smart thing is to burn Lorem to the ground for a legendary grudge. But the problem is, regardless of how you decide to take it and when you decide to take it, the problem is once you take Caracade Peaks, you're probably going to take it when it's, and you're going to get it as a tier 2 or tier 3 settlement. Like if you rush it, it's going to be a tier 2 settlement. You could wait longer, especially with Quick, have a big showdown with that. But once you take it, not only do you lose that upkeep downside, but you also gain a monumental level of power in a really, really good settlement. And that's just broken in terms of campaign design. You can also look at Phoric. Sure, Thorgrim works. Malachi works really well. One of the best campaign that CA has probably ever designed in the game or in Total War history. Malachi works. Grombrindle works. Thorgrim works. But Phoric, Ungrim, and Belegar especially, not quite as much. So they need to do some mechanics updates for those lords. Maybe if Belegar gradually unlock benefits for holding Caracade Peak, something like that. Or Ungrim having actually useful faction-wide benefits for Slayers would work better. Another thing I would say is that research tree-wise, this is a general problem in the game, that you can only research one thing at a time, and it's like, if you're playing a dwarf campaign, let me put it like this. Getting Construction Guild and Grand Throne Chamber, as well as a lot of other benefits from the guilds, just completely overshadows the clans. Again, general issue with research tree, maybe we should be able to research 2 things at the same time as any race. I think that would open up a lot more options, but not 2 things in the same tree or in the same path, right? So you can't just research 2 things in guilds. You have to research one thing in clans, one thing in guilds. I think that would be a good thing, right? That would actually add some research variety. It would help a lot of races out. And with other races that only have one tree, it's like one line that you can only research. But that's a general game issue with research. It just kind of hurts the dwarves more because there's a lot of awesome shit here, and yet there's only one path that's really worth it. Get High King Authority, get Rat Poison, Dwarven Grims, move on to Underway Trade Caravan, and whatever else you want here until you unlock Runi's Blessing, and then everything else is fluff, because by that point you're dominating things. Another problem with the dwarves is Oath Gold. So you don't gain enough Oath Gold in battle for that research, and that research is really useful and really powerful. So here's what you do in every Dwarven campaign. You have a building and gives you construction cost reduction in the province, but you're really better off getting the Oath Gold building. And so you have an economic choice that is completely meaningless because one is just far better than the others. It's also annoying because dwarf buildings can be expensive, but if you really want a lot of power, you want to go down that path. So the Oath Gold generation is not well handled. On top of that, we also have the Forge. Great system, gives you a lot of power, but again, it's just like, oh, I have to make a lot of items, right? It's also completely fluff, like, because this stuff is expensive. You're using the same research for, you know, the same resource as you would for research, and it's just much better to get the research, and by the time you finish all that, it doesn't matter. Dwarves do suffer from the perspective of, like, they're really strong later on, but you kind of don't care because the campaign is long since over. Another thing I would criticize, though, with the dwarves is the legend garages themselves. Not in the fact that they exist, not in the fact that we have these objectives, but how these objectives play out, right? Oh, go invade Ulthuan to sell the Final War of Vengeance. Why would I want to do that? Ulthuan does not have a climate, the reward is not worth it. And another thing I would like to point out about this, grudges in the lore can be sold with either gold or with blood. So maybe we could have an economics element with the High Elves, right? If we have enough in alliance, we could, you know, we could have a meter over here with legendary grudges. And if we, you know, for greenskins and for Skaven, obviously you want to wipe them out. But for High Elves, that's a different discussion, right? Or Wood Elves, right? So maybe you can sell the score to a degree, but not completely wipe them out. Especially annoying with Athaloran, because you don't care about the forest whatsoever. You just want the Oak of Ages. But you have to take everything else, hold everything else until you wipe out everyone, and then you just literally sell everything. That's not a good dynamic in a campaign. It's the smaller of the issues, I know, you know, compared to the metric ton of issues that other factions have, but that's kind of the frustrating aspect of Dwarves. They are so freaking close to being extraordinary, and it's within reach if Creative Assembly just did, you know, a couple more minor stuff. Except, you know, legendary lore mechanics that would require more. Another system, the final one really, is to talk about the Deeps. So the Deeps system was created by, I think, the same person who was responsible in a lot of ways for Vampire Coast. So great idea. Balancing leaves a lot to be desired over there. You can kind of tell what kind of developer made it. Great designer, not so much in balancing. That's the thing with CA. They don't care about campaign balance a lot. So when Warhammer 3 has campaigns that end very quickly, because especially with the dwarves, you're going to dominate very quickly, then everything else feels like busy work. And so you look at the Deeps, right? It's a system that rewards long-term investment or investment into long-term benefits. But what do you care about that? You don't have to. Like, the only reason you would invest money in the Deeps is like, oh, I can make a lot more freaking money in a campaign if I did so. So why would I do so? That's the thing. Like, why would I spend such a huge level of money on a system that I don't need. Oh, you can get more money. That's not useful to me as a player. It's not particularly important. And so the deeps just feels redundant. The power of the deeps is certainly there, but between the construction time, the fact that the deep structure itself requires you to spend population surplus to unlock it, I feel like the Great Gate should just be available and you should have deeps in, like, you can pick a settlement and just put the deeps there, and maybe the structures should be cheaper and faster to construct, but don't force me to choose between population surplus and as well as a building slot in the settlement. So yeah, it's like, remove this building, let us pick a settlement to put the deeps in it if we want to, or access them without this building, and then just have lower construction, not the stacking benefit that only really matters much later on in the campaign. Because I think the system is good. It's just, you know, the cost of things, the construction down like 5,000 for a building is not... It's a system that only works long term, but dwarves are really good at decimating campaign map. Some people say, oh, dwarves shouldn't play hyper-aggressive. I think a lot of people who say that completely miss the damn point about what the dwarves are in the Warhammer lore. If you think the dwarves sit on their ass and do nothing in the lore, that is not true. Dwarves may shut the gates down to their holds, but every time they do so, it's because they failed, and they failed hard. They go out and fight, say, you know, Grom the Paunch or Gorbad. They get flattened by them, and that's when they shut the gates. But they do try and engage in those fights. It's only when dwarves have had a systemic failure of, like, their political system, when Forgrim died, that happened in End Times, that the dwarves shut the gate. So, like, the idea of the slow-moving passive dwarves is not exactly how the dwarves are doing things in the lore. Just want to point that out there because it's like a really popular misconception that gets spread around by a lot of people who have no idea what they're talking about. But yeah. Regardless, those are the kind of issues I would like to see what resolve the dwarves. But again, they're in a really good spot, but they could be in a perfect spot in as much as Warhammer 3 currently allows. That's where I stand. Questine, signing out.